kick things off with our panel, I'd like to turn it over to Mohammed to offer a land acknowledgement. So Mohammed, over to you.
In the spirit of friendship and solidarity, we, the National Educational Association of Disabled Students, wish to respectfully acknowledge the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who are traditional stewards of this land we know as Canada. At present, I'm speaking from Quebec City, located at the confluence of Niuwencio territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Nadakina territory of the Wabanaki, and the Nitassanian territory of the Innu, and the Wolastoquk territory of the Wolastoqey. We extend our deepest respect for their enduring presence and profound stewardship of these lands. As we assemble for our national event centered on post-secondary students living with disabilities, we wish to highlight the intersectionality of Indigenous and disability identities. We honor the unique perspectives, contributions, and resilience of Indigenous peoples and individuals with disabilities, acknowledging the systemic barriers that have historically been and continue to be confronted by these communities. We stand committed to learning from, understanding, and respecting the rich histories, wisdom, and diversity that these communities contribute to our society as we strive towards a more inclusive and equitable future. We pledge to continuously honor these lands and their complex histories. In the spirit of reconciliation, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the Indigenous history of our regions and to honor the Indigenous peoples who live here. Additionally, we are encouraged to engage in open and thoughtful dialogues about disability, inclusivity, and accessibility, with the aim of fostering a more empathetic and inclusive society for all. Today, as we recognize the past and learn from it, we jointly work towards crafting a better future, one where we respect and validate the myriad experiences within the disability community and continually honor the traditional custodians of these lands.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Before we get into our panel and have a conversation about the tour, the year in review, some highlights, I'd like to offer a couple of opportunities for you to learn about our organization and to learn a little bit about State of the Schools. So to tell you a little bit about the National Educational Association of Disabled Students, or NEADS, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to give a little bit of an overview of our organization.
The National Educational Association of Disabled Students, NEADS, is a by and for cross-disability, cross-Canada charitable organization supporting full access to education and employment for disabled post-secondary students and graduates. Working across 3 strategic areas of debt reduction, experience in class and on campus, and employment, NEADS offers a variety of events, resources, reports, financial assistance programs, and opportunities for disabled students and graduates. To improve opportunities in higher education and the labor market for disabled students, we collaborate with post-secondary stakeholders, other non-governmental organizations, employers, disability service providers, and community members. We provide ongoing advice to Employment and Social Development Canada and provincial and territorial governments, and work to promote government programs and services that support higher education for disabled students. The Virtual Access for All project is a 2-year project funded by the Employment and Social Development Canada's Supports for Student Learning program. The Virtual Access for All project supports disabled students to successfully navigate the transition to post-secondary education. Since the beginning of this project in 2021, we have been connecting students with existing mentoring opportunities and resources, offered webinars on various topics related to accessibility, expanded our National Student Awards program, and funded our Accessibility Resilience program. Disabled students often experience systemic barriers to education, which make it more challenging for them to complete their studies and may cause them to graduate with more debt. Projects such as this one play an important role in ensuring disabled students can successfully complete their studies and be a part of an inclusive economic recovery for all individuals.
Thank you, Sarah. So that's a little bit of an overview of who we are and what we're doing and some of the important gaps in the post-secondary landscape that we fill. I'd like to ask my colleague Chloe to tell you a little bit more about what this whole State of the Schools tour is and why it's so important. So thank you, Chloe. Go ahead.
Okay, one second. Since last November, NEADS has been visiting disabled student group and post-secondary institutions on average cost Canada to partnering with local disabled student groups and community organizations. It was made possible by our field for all process, a 2-year process funded by Employment and Social Development Canada's support for student learning program. Durch das have included seasons and events. Ottawa, Montreal, Victoria, Winnipeg, and London. The knowledge gains from is of skills without has been intensive for as we always attempt to set our work on the diverse and intersectional needs of our membership consisting of disabled students and graduates. The lived experience during discussions varied from our priorities, our programming, and our state of the legal report.
Thank you so much, Chloe. It's a great overview of what we've done to date, why we're doing it, and why it's so important. So now I'd like to open it up to our panelists. And we have 4 panelists with us today. I don't think our 5th panelist has joined us yet. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, but we have Ashton from Western University, Julia from University of Victoria, Stéphane and Stacy from ACAPS. So just a note about who's here. So to start off, I'd like to ask each panelist, tell me a little bit about yourself, and can you share a little bit about how you came to be involved with your student organization? So I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with Ashton.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Ashton. I'm in the Master's of Philosophy program, focusing on issues of global justice and human rights. I came to be involved with SOGS actually years ago when I was always around the office getting my bus pass, and our secretary at the time insisted that I run to be the accessibility commissioner since I was already doing a lot of activism in the community. I stepped away from the role, but then came back to fill a gap of no one being in that space. And now I'm no longer the accessibility commissioner. But Yeah, SOGS does a lot of work in terms of advocating for students, and it's important that we continue to advocate for all students, including students with disabilities. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. And just a couple of things. SOGS is the Society of Graduate Students. It's the student advocacy organization and union, student union at Western University, student government, and serves around 7,000 graduate students. So just to give some context for people who may not be familiar with SOGS. Julia, I'd like to pass it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be involved with your student organization.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. So yeah, my name is Julia. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a queer neurodivergent settler here on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen, Wasanich, Songhees, and Esquimalt First Nations. I live with multiple chronic illnesses and just a combination of physical and mental health disabilities. So I got involved with the UVic Society for Students with a Disability 4 years ago now. At the time, I was running a mental health awareness club at UVic, and I connected with the SSD through the work I was doing with the club at the time. I got to know some of the SSD community and just felt really welcome and understood. And especially as my chronic illnesses were getting worse around that time, it was nice to find some people who were understanding about that. I ended up getting more involved with the SSD over the club, just since the SSD had a lot more capacity and funding to affect change on campus and to support students. So I joined the SSD Council, first as a member at large and later as student liaison, and then co-chair, and now I'm the chairperson of the SSD. And I also co-chair our Access for All campaign, which advocates for equitable access to higher education through the continued implementation of online learning options that were made available at the beginning of the pandemic. Do you want me to share about the SSD too, or just kind of how I got involved?
I think I'd like to share a little bit about the SSD. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So we support students through a combination of advocacy, funding opportunities, events, and programming. We have a physical space in the student union building where folks can hang out and study. And we offer snacks, computers, free printing. We also have a respite room, which people can use if they need a quiet space. We have outings around town just to help build community. We had one yesterday where folks went to the petting zoo and the goat stampede there. We have online social events, just like games nights, movie nights, and educational events like panel discussions and workshops. We also offer peer support groups, which have been really successful, and would totally recommend doing those elsewhere if anyone's interested. We have a food security program, which is probably our most popular and has been one of our big successes as well. People choose between a biweekly grocery delivery or a reimbursement for groceries they've purchased. We also have a funding program for things like mobility aids and assistive technology. And we also have a number of different campaigns, including the Access for All one I mentioned.
Great. And so many things of what you were saying resonated with me. Food security is a huge problem on many campuses. And as Sarah and Chloe so aptly mentioned in their opening remarks, we as students with disabilities incur more debt. It takes us longer. And so those basic needs are more difficult to meet. And I'm really pleased to hear that you're advocating for a continued approach to hybrid learning that takes into account people who just thrive so much better when they're in a virtual space rather than a physical one. So thank you so much. So I'd like to turn it over to Stéphane from ACEPS to talk a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with ACEPS.
Ou Stacy.
I can start if Stéphane doesn't want to. Je vais parler en français. Mon nom est Stacy. Je suis chargée de communication à l'ACEPS depuis maintenant 1 an. Donc, l'ACEPS, Association québécoise pour l'équité et l'inclusion au post-secondaire au Québec. Donc, c'est une organisation qui se consacre à la promotion des droits des étudiants en situation de handicap au Québec. Au niveau post-secondaire, on organise plusieurs activités, on collabore à des projets de recherche pour soutenir la défense collective des droits des étudiants en situation de handicap. Et aussi, on offre un programme de bourse annuel. Moi, la manière que j'ai commencé à travailler, c'est que je voulais juste, dans le fond, travailler dans une organisation qui fait la promotion de l'inclusion et l'équité et qui aussi fait un travail important au niveau du Québec.
Thank you, Stacy. Stéphane, do you have anything that you wish to add, or do you feel Stacy's covered it?
Stacy a quand même fait un très bon tour de table sur ce qu'on fait à la KIEPS. J'ajouterais que notre projet principal pour les prochaines années, ça va être de recenser la disparité qu'il y a entre les divers établissements postsecondaires qu'on a sur notre territoire. Il y a une grosse disparité au niveau des services, donc on va travailler fort là-dessus. Moi, je suis à la direction de la KIEPS depuis à peine 1 an, puis c'est étant moi-même un étudiant en situation de handicap, ayant fait un baccalauréat de 2000 à 2005, j'ai eu des problématiques au niveau des services. Puis bon, quand je suis retourné aux études en 2019 au 2e cycle, ben, il y a eu aussi là des problématiques, ce qui m'ont amené à connaître la KIEPS. Puis, je suis arrivé comme chargé de projet au mois de juin l'année passée. Puis, pas longtemps après, ben, j'en ai pris la direction. J'y crois, puis on veut poursuivre à faire avancer les choses ici au Québec.
Thank you so much. And, you know, all of you were one of our tour partners and tour hosts. And so why do you believe that tours like this are so critical and so important in the disability space? So just to make sure that everybody gets a voice break and a breath break, I'm going to kind of mix up the order each time. So I'd like to start with Julia. Can you tell us a little bit about why you think this kind of tour is so important for the disability community of students?
Yeah, thanks. So I think that in a lot of ways, the experience of being a disabled post-secondary student can be quite isolating, and ableism is so inherent in academia, at least at this time, and that can lead folks to feeling, I think, ashamed or bad about themselves for struggling when really the institutional barriers are the problem. So I find that talking to other disabled students about the challenges we face can really help us recognize that the barriers we face are real and they're a problem, and it's not okay that we have to deal with them. And it can also give us a community with which to advocate for eliminating or reducing those barriers. And I think often post-secondary institutions are resistant to meaningful change, and instead of recognizing that they have problematic practices, they try to make us feel like those of us that are struggling are a small minority and that we're the problem for complaining. I think the tours give us a chance to see that other students at our university and at other universities across Canada are dealing with similar barriers. And this broader perspective makes it clear that there's a systematic problem here, that disabled students are in many ways being fundamentally excluded from higher education.
Yeah, you've hit on a lot of really important points. And I think one of those is that for a lot of us, imposter syndrome's real. We feel like if we're asking for an accommodation, we're asking for a favor, or like we're not doing the same quality of work as our able-bodied counterparts. And I think you're right in the sense that the tours provide a community of learners and people to have those safe and brave conversations with about how we navigate these challenges. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've started to learn as a graduate student mentoring other graduate students with disabilities is that really our systems and structures that are in place are in place sort of around able-bodied standards of normal body minds. And so really breaking out of that mold. So I think you've touched on some really important points. Ashton, I would love to hear from you. You were one of our tour partners and hosts. You were actually our last tour stop just in June. Why do you believe that the conversations like this and events like this are so important for students with disabilities?
There's a lot of reasons why that is the case, especially with London. Like Julia mentioned, there's a lot of isolation in the disability community, and especially on campuses where there are not enough programming or supports available, even though we do have an accessible education office on campus. I know with many students, the difficulties of navigating that with the inherent ableism, like Julia said, in academia and also within individual programs is also difficult for students with disabilities to find other members of the community to help them advocate or navigate their specific programs. With London, I made a really important point of reaching out beyond the institutions. We did reach out to Fanshawe. We did have people from Western, but a lot of members of my network also reached out to the London Health Sciences EDI people and other EDI people within the London community to ensure that other people had resources and connect. So I know for many students who couldn't find supports at Western or at Fanshawe, they were able to reach out to members of the community that were able to guide them through other supports and access. So this event actually helped create new networks and also inspire new projects and new working relationships. And I know that there's been much more to come, especially with my conversations with the King's College and also with Accessible Education's new director, Jeffrey Cohen. So looking forward to seeing how we can work together to actually move things forward, to actually make meaningful change. Because at this event, we've heard from many students that are suffering emotionally and are burnt out from putting in so much human capital and emotional labor and not seeing results. So hopefully showing the vulnerability of these students and even our staff that were present allows things to move forward in a more authentic way.
Yeah, so much of that is salient, especially in a climate where we as disabled students and disabled colleagues and learners are required to sort of engage in epistemic exploitation. So always educating other people about our barriers and challenges. And as people who are often living below the poverty line or people that are under and unemployed, a lot of that work falls to us. And I really resonated with what you said. And I think it's interesting because for me, I think part of the challenge is we want to consult, but sometimes consultation isn't meaningful. And I think what stood out to me in your remarks is the importance of meaningful conversations and meaningful consultation. So thank you. So Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Why do you believe events like this are so important?
Au risque de me répéter, parce qu'on a déjà touché plusieurs points, mais je pense que c'est essentiel pour la communauté de se rassembler pour pouvoir avoir un espace, un safe space, une plateforme de discussion pour s'exprimer librement sur les questions liées à l'accessibilité, aux aménagements. Je pense que les événements comme du genre facilitent la collaboration entre les groupes d'étudiants en situation de handicap. Puis ça peut créer aussi une communauté de soutien. Puis ça aide aussi à sensibiliser le public, les établissements scolaires aux besoins des étudiants en situation de handicap.
Yeah, the safe space piece is really key there. And I think for a lot of us, we've talked about isolation already today, but I think for a lot of us, we don't know when it's safe to quote unquote come out or talk about maybe we have an invisible or a non-apparent disability. So we don't know who it's safe to share that with and to get feedback and support around navigating our education. Or sometimes it's just you're not sure how to ask those questions about when do I disclose and how do I navigate accommodations if they're being refused. So I think your point about the safe space is really, really key. Stéphane, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
De mon côté, je dirais que effectivement, c'est une problématique. C'est l'un des motifs pour lesquels on va faire une tournée des établissements postsecondaires. Fait que je trouve que des événements comme la tournée des écoles permettent à chacun de nous de voir un peu qu'il n'y a pas juste, par exemple, au Québec qu'on a des problématiques, qu'il y en a partout à travers le Canada. Fait que l'événement comme la tournée des écoles nous amène à probablement on va pouvoir amener une harmonisation, une inclusivité, qu'on ne soit plus obligé de demander des accommodements, mais que tout le monde ait le même accommodement, que l'école au postsecondaire soit égale pour tout le monde. Fait que, ça, c'est mon vœu pieux, là, mais c'est ce que je trouve qu'il ressort beaucoup là, des commentaires que j'entends depuis tantôt.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really apparent is that there are gaps that we need to think about filling because quite often the accessible education or accessible learning services provide accommodations in the classroom or perhaps for co-op, but there's so much learning that happens outside the classroom, whether that's in spaces like student unions or whether it's part-time work on campus or being a teaching assistant. And we know that those accommodations are sometimes harder to get, and they're fluid depending on the opportunity. So that kind of leads me into my next question about gaps. What gaps do you believe that tours like this help to fill on post-secondary campuses? And I'd like to start this time, if I may, with Ashton.
So the big gap that it's already been mentioned is, again, the building of community. But I think the biggest gap on campus is that can be addressed by these kind of tours are the attitudinal gaps. And then I think also with these tours, because they're across Canada, connecting different student body organizations, we're able to build momentum, national momentum, which means extra power when it comes to advocacy. If we have a national organization that is going across Canada, collecting all this stuff. And I guess Stéphane mentioned about these issues are everywhere. Instead of universities using that as an excuse, well, these issues are everywhere, so it's not unique to us. It's like these issues are everywhere and we need to take them as seriously as other EDI issues. This month is Pride Month. I mean, Disability Pride Month. And it's interesting that there's no recognition from my institution, no recognition from my city. Yet we're still talking about, the LGBT movement, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it'd be nice to see the kind of momentum behind the Pride movement or the anti-Black racism movement or gender equality. That kind of energy and momentum put behind disability rights and inclusion. Because without that, we can't get these institutions to change. They don't see the value in it. They don't see the humanity in it. And it's really hard to move things forward. So having these cross-country tours unites a lot more activists together, unites a lot more student groups together. We can learn from each other, learn to provide similar services, and also make the case how these services are working in other places and how that actually levels the playing field, how that improves the student experience, how that improves employment rates for students with disabilities, and how that also improves like overall mental health inclusion, so that these institutions that claim to be all for equity, diversity, and inclusion can actually really be for equity, diversity, and inclusion, because that literally includes accessibility and disability rights.
I'm just sitting here cheering and yesing to everything. The Disability Pride Month, I first want to wish everybody a happy Disability Pride Month, but you're absolutely right. There's been no recognition. I attend the same institution, but also not in my city. And I think you're bringing up a point that we've talked about before, but it's how access is often left out of EDI. We're like the poor country cousin, whether that's because disability isn't seen as affecting people to the degree that these other EDI issues are, or whether disability perhaps is feared, so people don't want to talk about it. But the reality is we're a quarter of the population, and every one of those EDI groups has people with disabilities in it. And disability, we know, disproportionately impacts people who are Indigenous or BIPOC. And so I think part of for me, what I take away and what I want us to keep thinking about is why do we not have more accessibility considerations in EDI work, and how do we bring those conversations forward? And I see a note from Julia that she completely agrees. So over to you, Julia. Any gaps that the tour has the potential to fill or has filled?
Yeah, I feel like Ashton covered that so well, but I'll try to give an answer too. So I think that the gaps these tours fill is in large part just like the need for solidarity and community, and for a place to have open discussions about the barriers that we face as disabled students. And I think that realizing we're not alone in our struggles can be really uplifting, even as we're dealing with challenging circumstances. So like, for instance, I felt ashamed for a really long time about how much I struggle with in-person attendance due to being chronically ill. But then connecting with the SST community and the NEADS community has helped me realize that I'm definitely in good company with finding in-person attendance to be a barrier, and all of us deserve better. It's also really helpful just to be able to compare experiences between different post-secondary institutions and to hear examples of meaningful inclusion of disabled folks, or to learn strategies that have worked to affect real change at other schools. Also for the tour stop at UVic, we included a panel discussion about the benefits of online course access and recorded lectures. And for that panel, it consisted of disabled students and also instructors who we knew were really passionate about accessibility. So when we face a lot of ableism from professors, often as disabled students, it was like quite refreshing to hear from faculty who actually prioritize accessibility and care about our community, and also to have the chance to share with them like the barriers that we face when dealing with in-person only classes. So I think the tours can also be a good opportunity for meaningful collaboration between students and faculty, which at least at UVic, I feel like doesn't happen very often. And I would say that's a significant gap too.
Yeah, and I think, one of the pieces to that is just compare like known practices or promising practices across institutions, like what's working well and how did you get there? What were the steps that you took to build that food bank or to build that, tutoring center or to build that petition that goes out to students to share their concerns about in-person learning. So I think that's really important. And I think, the whole stronger together piece is really what's resonating for me in both of your responses is, this idea that we're stronger together, we have more knowledge and we have more people with whom to cross collaborate. So thank you. Stéphane, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Il y a eu beaucoup de bonnes choses qui ont été dites. Puis je suis tout à fait d'accord avec tout ce qui a été dit, c'est que plus on va travailler en collaboration plutôt qu'en silo, mieux on va aider tous nos membres, puis tous les étudiants en situation de handicap à travers le Canada, puis possiblement même ailleurs. On peut apprendre d'ailleurs aussi. On travaille sur un projet présentement avec des non-voyants au niveau de la Belgique qui vont venir faire un test de lecteur d'écran, des petites capsules chez nous. Fait que je trouve ça intéressant qu'on s'ouvre puis qu'on puisse voir ce qui se fait ailleurs, puis amener ça ici aussi. Puis qu'on travaille, qu'on puisse le partager avec tout le monde. D'un bout à l'autre du Canada, moi, je trouve ça intéressant. Fait que, en partie, la tournée, là, on parlait quelle lacune elle peut combler, ben, elle nous rassemble, ce qui fait qu'on est moins isolé. En étant moins isolé, on va se faire entendre partout. En se faisant entendre partout, tout le monde va comprendre que c'est pas je reviens à ce que je disais tantôt, c'est pas une accommodation. L'inclusion doit se faire pour tout le monde. On parlait tantôt des cours asynchrones. Je trouve que c'est une idée magnifique. Moi, j'ai fait mes études à distance. Je les ai fait à mon rythme, puis j'ai trouvé ça parfait pour moi. Puis après ça, ça a pris une pandémie pour qu'on réussisse à annexer avec ça les examens. Parce que dans mon cas, ça a été une problématique. L'examen en ligne, il n'y en avait pas. Il fallait que je me déplace puis que quelqu'un écrive mes examens. Donc là, je rentre dans des détails un peu trop personnels là, pour la discussion, mais c'est un exemple de ce qui fait que s'il y a des possibilités ailleurs, comme la pandémie a fait une bonne chose, c'est que maintenant, on a tous les examens en ligne. Fait que c'est quelque chose pour nous autres au Québec qui s'est avancé beaucoup. Fait que je pense qu'on peut continuer à partager là-dessus, puis travailler en collaboration. Pour moi, c'est le grand point. Voilà.
Yeah, I love this idea of the pre-recorded lectures. I think for sure those address, what I took from your comments is that absolutely inclusion is for everybody. And what I thought about was a phrase that a colleague of mine, so it's not mine, I can't steal it, introduced me to, and that is access and accommodations are two sides of the same coin. So accessibility is the gold standard. It's what we want to strive for. Accommodations are what we put in place when accessibility isn't working for a specific person. And so I think, what you're saying is, yes, accommodations are one piece, but thinking about things more holistically. So, for example, your comments about the pre-recorded lectures, those would be helpful for sure for lots of folks with disabilities, but also folks who may have caregiving responsibilities or maybe parents or or maybe juggling work and school. So I think really UDL for learning is a big part of what you're sharing, but also just kind of thinking a little bit more critically and creatively about accommodations. So Stacy, over to you. Any gaps that you feel that this tour has the potential to address or has addressed that haven't been mentioned already?
Je pense que tout le monde a déjà tout dit, mais en général, ça permet d'attirer l'attention sur les nombreux obstacles et les défis auxquels sont confrontés les étudiants en situation de handicap, parce qu'on peut voir que dans le fond, il y a encore du travail à faire, c'est pas fini, il y a encore beaucoup de choses à faire pour l'inclusion et l'équité.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Great points by everybody. Just kind of thinking about how to move that needle. So we've mentioned this in-person learning mandate already, but fueled by this idea of academic ableism, fueled by our very, hyper-productive capitalist post-secondary structures that we know favor able-bodied, normal mind bodies, whatever that means. Thinking about this return to in-person learning, what do you believe post-secondary institutions should do to address learners who either don't feel safe returning to campus or don't have the supports to return to campus? And Julia, I would like to start with you.
Thanks. Definitely an issue I care a lot about. I feel like it's critical that post-secondary institutions move towards a high flex education system. So that just means a system in which students can choose between participating online, in person, or some combination of the two based on their individual needs. So there's so much research now demonstrating the long-term harmful effects of COVID, and forcing people into classrooms where almost no one is masked is particularly unfair to folks who may be more at risk of severe COVID infection or long COVID, and immunocompromised folks, or even just people who live with someone who is immunocompromised, shouldn't have to choose between their health and their studies. But beyond the COVID context, there are, as you mentioned, so many people who would benefit from online access, including a lot of disabled and chronically ill folks. And I should clarify too, I totally recognize that there are disabled folks who really need to be in the classroom to learn, and that's completely valid as well. But in terms of needing online access, I can use myself as an example. I have multiple chronic illnesses, including Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, ME/CFS, mast cell activation syndrome, and dysautonomia. So I have significant fatigue and pain on a daily basis. And then due to the craniocervical instability and intracranial pressure issues that result from my EDS, I can be upright for less than an hour per day and only like 5 or 10 minutes at a time. So as you can imagine, in-person attendance is really challenging for me. And most of the classes I need to finish my degree are now only being offered in person, despite having successfully moved them online at the beginning of the pandemic when abled folks needed that too. So if we could accommodate abled folks back in 2020 by offering lectures online, why don't disabled folks deserve that same accommodation when they need it longer term? That's what I meant when I said that there are ways in which disabled folks are systematically excluded from higher education, like folks like myself and others really need this accommodation and aren't receiving it. And there are also so many people who've left university or never even come to university because in-person attendance and other ableist barriers are a problem for them. I think it's a fundamental responsibility of our post-secondary institutions to offer a way for students to attend class remotely if needed, and to mandate that lectures be recorded. Like our university installed a recording technology in over 100 classrooms, yet we can't get an accommodation saying that our lectures are recorded, which is ridiculous because they've already spent the money on it. But like Elizabeth mentioned too, it's not just disabled folks, but also parents and caregivers, people who have jobs outside of school, international students, even just, I know where I live, the cost of living is ridiculous and the rental market is really tight. So some people just can't come to UVic because they can't find a place to live in time. So online access would be great for them too. I think a lot of us these days are managing multiple commitments and can really benefit from the flexibility afforded by recorded lectures and online access.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in a different world, aren't we, than pre-COVID. I think, we're in a world that, due to climate justice and climate equity, we want to be moving our carbon footprint into, lower. And so that means, traveling less or thinking about traveling less. And I bring that up because I think about conferences. When you were speaking, I was thinking about how now so many conferences are opened up to remote or hybrid, and for folks with disabilities who might find it difficult to travel overseas or abroad, we're now able to access those opportunities, which then leads to better outcomes for us academically because we're able to put those on our CVs. So I'm able to say I went to a conference in Oxford, even though I didn't go in person, and I was still able to get that experience. And that's so important for us as academics and scholars. So thank you so much. Ashton, over to you.
Julia said a lot of what I would like to say, but the big thing that universities need to do, or institutions in general need to do, is the doing part. It was so frustrating, like Julia pointed out, during COVID, that many of these things were recorded lectures online, or even ways to interact with the community were done online. Yet now, post-COVID, and I do air quotes because there are still people who are suffering from COVID, catching COVID, or being hospitalized due to COVID. So, there's still a risk, but because, again, it's not affecting the general population the same way it's affecting people with disabilities, again, we're seen as lesser than. So whatever happens to us, it's okay. The same restrictions are not in place. And as Julia pointed out, there's just so many intersections of where this benefits many of us. For me, I'm also have a chronic illness that's so complicated. It's systemic sclerosis, which is scleroderma. And I'm like, my immune system is shot because of the drugs I take: diabetes, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. There's just so much things with dryness, and my ability to walk every day varies a lot. And I have many doctor's appointments. And also I do lots of advocacy that is not related to education, but also related to my ability to get around in my city. So transportation, we have poor accessible transportation in London. And also that we're on the snow belt, it's difficult to get around in the winter time. And then construction season, which is a season, it's horrible to get around again. It's exhausting. So trying to just navigate the world, taking out that one barrier of having to physically be somewhere makes a huge difference. And the doing is so easy. I remember at our State of the Schools tour, many of the professors and staff that presented highlighted how easy many of these things are to do, and how easy it is to make accommodations or to make things accessible from the get-go. So they're known, as many students pointed out, these are known things, yet the university doesn't do those things. So I think the key thing is not that we have to bring all the information together. It's just like, it's already together. How do we motivate institutions just to do it? And I know it's going against the capitalists, because when they have students on campus, they're spending money on food, clothing, socializing, and all these other things that draw in income. And then even their partners draw in income from that. But how can we create some ways that that's not the motivation? Or if there is some sort of capitalist motivation, they can do something similar online. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't be pushed towards being there in person when, especially during, like, take away COVID, flu season, that was the worst time for me, because everybody still comes to campus during flu season, because whether they're sick or not, because they don't want to miss a lecture because they're getting participation marks. And our institutions still haven't created a succinct or well-rounded self-reported absences program. So even able-bodied or enabled students are when they get sick, it's harder for them to say that they need to stay home to protect other people and also to protect themselves to get well. So how do we prioritize wellness and well-being over profits and status that's related to these things?
Yeah, I think, so much of what you said there, I think, speaks to this, this idea of spoons, right? And that we only have so many spoons. And when I don't have to think about how I'm physically going to get somewhere, I can put that energy into my learning and into being creative. So I think that's a really important point to think about. And I think, in terms of this idea, I was thinking about your comment around the London tour stop. Not only did faculty and staff say how easy it was, but many of them were virtual for that event. And it affords that flexibility if people need to do that. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Stéphane, over to you.
Oui, il y a eu plein de belles choses qui se sont dites. Encore, il y a un mot que j'ai bien aimé, hybride. Ça fait longtemps. J'ai étudié de 2000 à 2005, comme je le disais tantôt, au baccalauréat, puis je demandais à ce que un mode hybride soit disponible. J'ai milité dans ces années-là auprès du conseil d'administration de l'université, auprès de l'association étudiante. Puis j'étais comme un martien, là. Je demandais quelque chose qui était comme bizarre dans une université qui était virtuelle. L'université TÉLUQ au Québec, c'est une université en ligne, mais on n'avait pas les examens en ligne. Avec toutes les problématiques que tout le monde a, qu'on vit tous et toutes, et il faut que les établissements postsecondaires, puis là, on parle beaucoup de l'université, mais c'est au niveau collégial, au niveau de la formation professionnelle, ça a besoin d'être hybride. Il faut qu'il y ait, quand je parlais tantôt d'inclusivité complète pour tous, handicapés ou non handicapés, on revient toujours à ça. S'il y avait une possibilité d'avoir accès à ce qu'on a besoin, tout simplement, ça peut être une personne non handicapée qui va vouloir avoir un cours en ligne parce qu'il y a la grippe ou il y a une problématique X, il file un peu moins, il est un peu en dépression, il a besoin d'être plus seul, il a de la misère à se concentrer s'il est avec du monde. Fait que s'il y a une opportunité d'avoir ça, ça ne devient plus un accommodement, ça devient tout simplement, on est tous inclusifs. Fait que ce soit tous les modes dont on a parlé, hybride, à distance, sur campus, un mélange de tout ça, je pense que c'est ce qui ressort de tout ce qu'on dit là. S'il y avait toutes ces possibilités-là, puis à la base, si un cours est monté en fonction d'être donné de toutes les façons, il ne coûte pas plus cher à monter, puis il dessert tout le monde. On n'a plus besoin d'accommodement pour une personne. Tout le monde y a accès. Voilà.
Yeah, absolutely. Stacy, do you have anything to add?
Je dirais une chose qui serait importante aussi, c'est important que le personnel, le personnel dans les institutions soit formé et sensibilisé parce que souvent, ils sont peut-être un peu réticents aussi à offrir les accommodations nécessaires comme justement les options d'apprentissage flexibles et hybrides à distance et tout ça. Donc, eux aussi seraient commencer à la base aussi, ça serait important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm mindful of time, and I'm also mindful that our audience might have some questions. So I think what I'd like to do is ask one more question, but just have folks sort of keep their answers brief if possible, knowing that this question is not something that can easily be answered briefly. We know that accommodations quite often aren't put in place unless documentation is provided. Sometimes the cost of those assessments can be a barrier. So people either aren't receiving the accommodations they require, or they're incurring financial debt to get accommodations because of the cost of assessments. So what do you think post-secondary institutions can do to address this idea of, or address this practice of requiring often expensive psychoeducational assessments or medical documentation to provide accommodations? So Ashton, I'll start with you.
Well, it's a little bit of a tough one for me because I don't think the post-secondary institutions can do as much as they claim to do. They can focus more on the need and just make things accessible. But I think that there needs to be a restructuring of our whole education and health system so that these diagnoses can be provided easily to anybody who needs them, and not just for domestic students, but also for international students. So there needs to, and it needs to happen at a younger age. And also we need to have a lot more professionals out there to be able to do the diagnosis, because a lot of it is, well, yeah, you get the money, but then you're waiting a whole year, which takes a lot of time out of your learning and your ability to get what you need to move ahead. So the problem is a lot bigger than just the post-secondary institutions.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Ashton, because even earlier when we were talking about transportation and the barriers that you were mentioning that you advocate to remove in London, you know, we can be as inclusive as we want as educators, as employers, but the reality is that we need access in all spheres. So whether it's transportation, whether it's attendant care services, all of those things need to come together for a person to be able to fully participate and be included. So it isn't just one, one sector. And I think that's really important that you brought that up. And thank you, Anne. I see your comment in the chat. Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
Moi, je dirais, c'est comme Ashton l'a déjà mentionné, il faut une restructuration du problème du système éducatif au complet. Donc, il faut mettre en place des programmes de soutien et plus de ressources pour les étudiants.
Great, thank you. And Julia, anything to add?
Yeah, I think folks have covered it well, but I guess just two main things. One, like reducing reliance on the medical model and the need for medical documentation, and then two, providing funding for students who need assessments, or maybe working with, like, especially for assessments like for autism and learning disabilities that can be quite expensive, maybe having like graduate students do those or something like that. But I think Ashton's correct in that it should really involve actually changing the medical system too, to make these things more accessible.
And Stéphane, any final thoughts to share?
Oui, de mon côté, moi, ce que je trouve qui pourrait être important, c'est que chaque institution devrait avoir accès à des professionnels qui peuvent poser des diagnostics. Si chaque institution disposait de ces ressources-là, ben à ce moment-là, ils pourraient être fournis de façon gracieuse à toutes les personnes qui en ont besoin. Il faut les faire réagir. Il faut être proactif dans cette question-là. Trop de personnes attendent après des diagnostics ou ne peuvent pas se payer des diagnostics et souffrent, puis vont même aller jusqu'on en a vu au niveau de l'association, qui ont cessé leurs études à cause des démarches. Donc, moi, c'est quelque chose que je proposerais, ça, que les institutions aient accès à un bassin de professionnels qui fournissent des services partout. Voilà.
Thank you so much. With that, I want to, before we wrap up, do a couple of things. And the first is to thank our panelists today for not just sharing their wisdom and their experiences and parts of their journey with us today, but for being a part of our tour and our journey over the last year, whether it was hosting us in person or hosting us virtually, whether it was being there to provide speakers or ideas about speakers. We really, today's really, I think the message is the importance of community, and we're so lucky to have all of you as part of our NEADS community. So thank you to our panelists, Ashton, Julia, Stacy, and Stéphane. I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Carly, who I think has something very, very exciting to say and to share with you. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere. Carly.
I don't know what you're talking about. These are non-planned.
Are you sure? Oh, okay. All right.
So everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm Carly Fox. My pronouns are she, her, elle, and I'm NEADS Communications and Partnerships Director. Behind the scenes, I've been leading on partnership logistics and stage management and generally emceeing our tour stops. So if you've been to any of those, so sorry for the introduction again. So the last year has, I mean, undeniably been the best year of my life, to be super honest. And I think I speak for the whole NEADS team when I say it has been just so fulfilling, informative to meet these disabled students, meet them where they're at their schools, to really experience what they get to experience, whether that's supportive service providers or deeply, deeply inaccessible campuses. There's been a lot of ups and downs. So don't get me wrong, this has been exhausting and challenging work, but was it worth it? Absolutely. And am I sad that it's over? Totally. Hit it.
Carly, is it over?
I used to think that, I really did.
But
is it?
But
oh, that's my turn. It's my turn. Okay. Hello. We have been
we
renewed.
didn't script this. This is the off. We're off-roading it here.
Sorry to our interpreters, but we have been renewed for another 2 years for our whole virtual access for all project. So what that means is more funding for our scholarships, more of these webinars, and yes, more tour stops. I think about 9 of them. I'm going to tell you the ones we have proposed. Please do not hold me to it. Please do not hold.
I don't know how we do a drum roll, but you can just do one. All right.
All right.
Where's the first stop, Carly? Give it to me. Hit it. Hit me, Carly, one more time.
Fredericton, New Brunswick. Then we're going to go to Thunder Bay, Ontario. Then all the way over to Vancouver, British Columbia. Then Toronto, Ontario. And then Iqaluit, Nunavut, Antigonish, Nova Scotia, Windsor and Hamilton, Ontario, and wrapping up in Calgary or Alberta.
Wait, Carly.
Yeah.
Calgary.
Wait,
Calgary is in Alberta.
Calgary or Edmonton, Alberta. Sorry to all of Alberta for that one. That's it.
Okay.
So here's 9 more stops. It's going to be incredible. So please follow us on social media, sign up to the NEADS just so you don't miss out on the next 2 years. Oh,
Fun
that's
times. Okay, so wrapping us up, thank you so much everyone for attending. This will be available on YouTube soon, so do keep your eyes open for that and share with friends and colleagues. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our tech team, who Alan and Carly work so hard in the background to make sure that this happens. Our interpreters, thank you so very much. And thank you to my colleagues Adele and Chloe and Sarah and Mohammed for their remarks at the beginning. Have a lovely rest of your summer, everyone, and happy Disability Pride Month.
Woo! I think we're good to stop recording.
I think we are, Carly.